Hi, everybody. My name is Ben Piccini. Welcome to Radical Civility. So I want to talk about COVID coping today. COVID coping is what I'm calling how do we address the mental health component here of the emotional health. I don't like calling it mental health. The emotional health that we're grappling with. I have a number of friends who are actually having a really hard time with this. They're losing sleep. They are stressed. They are concerned. And I feel like now is a good time to discuss how do we do a good job of taking care of ourselves. Because I think that really matters. And so I have 5 or 6 ideas. Now I should warn you in advance, I am not a therapist. That should not come as a surprise to anybody. And while I joke about all of my advice comes with a money back guarantee, this is one where you need to be even more careful. I view this as a conversation starter. I view this as a place to air some of my ideas about how to stay healthy. But if you know better, if you're a therapist or if you're a psychologist or a psychiatrist, or frankly, if my ideas work for me but they don't work for you, all of that is okay. And I would love to be corrected on any of these. I do think that I have a good head on my shoulders, and I tend to be pretty resilient to this kind of stuff. And I think I've done enough reading to know I have a pretty good internal gut sense of what's going to be helpful and what's not. But again, if you feel differently, then please let me know. My real intent here is to be as helpful as I can. All right, so I've broken these out into like 5 different possible ideas. And the first idea is this. You know what kills a great horror movie? The ending. I know, it's a funny joke. But seriously, so let me give you a couple of examples here. So I just learned about this. I listened to, I can't remember if it was a podcast or a video call or something like that. And what they found was that the markets, meaning the stock markets, always overreact to bad news. And in particular, they overreact to crazy events like this. So what you tend to find is that the market in the medium term is a really, really good predictor of where things are going. But in the short term, it's a disaster, like up and down and up and down and up and down. And so you have to be able to ignore the noise and look at the general trend. But when the general trend goes down, you know that something bad is happening, and then it'll eventually start working its way up. One of the first mistakes people make is they look at the daily trend, and that's not a very good measure of where things are. But over the medium term, it can be a pretty good indicator. The market needs, one of the things that people will talk about when you look at market analysis first is, have we bottomed out yet? Are we finally to the point where we've gone through the worst? Because markets are really good at figuring out, they are very, very efficient. There's actually a term for that, the efficient markets hypothesis. It's a very interesting economic thing that I can talk about another time. But the basic point is they need information in order to know, are things going to continue getting worse or are things going to start getting better? And as it turns out, it's not actually it's not how bad a recession is that causes a lot of problems. It's the uncertainty. Because once we know where things are, I think things will start getting better pretty quickly. There's an interesting, in this podcast that I listened to, there was an interesting finding, and that is that in a lot of these recessions and depressions and things like this, the market had already dropped when only 10% of, bank failures had happened. The market had hit its bottom before 90% of bank failures had happened. So you have to understand there's a panic at the beginning that's associated with all of this. And then very quickly we know how bad things are, and it's still hard, but we know what we're grappling with. And then all of a sudden things get easier. And so when I say like that the ending kills the horror movie, what I'm saying is don't think you're fighting the virus and the fear from the virus when what you're really fighting is the uncertainty around the fear from the virus. Right now, markets are all a disaster and a mess, and they're up and down because things are still uncertain. Don't let the uncertainty bleed into you. Think about the fact that in another month, the virus will still be around. We'll still be fighting it. All of that I understand, but we will have a sense of where things are going. And it's that sense of where things are going that actually will allay a lot of fears. And people will say, okay, I know how to deal with this. I know how to have a plan for this. Okay. I think that one is really, really important. All right. Number 2. Well, actually, let me add to that real quick. We talk about what kills a good horror movie, and it's the ending. In just a second, I'm going to talk about where your brain tends to go during a thing like this. And it can go to bad things happening in the world. Let me give a place for your brain to go when you're having this difficulty. There will be an end to this. And when there is an end to this, what will we learn? I suspect that the world will be changed forever because of the COVID outbreak. I think this is one of those cultural hinge points where we will never be the same. I think in education we'll never be the same. And in fact, I'm writing a little thing on it. Okay. I think that this is going to change us over the long term. And that's a good thing. I think the silver lining is that we will be better as people because of what we've done. I mean, even the simplest example, just being around other people is something I will never take for granted again. And so thinking through that, thinking through how will we be better is something that I am finding to be really rewarding. Okay, so that's number one. What kills a good horror movie? The answer is the ending. All right. By the way, that comes from Signs. I don't know if you've seen it, or a lot of M. Night Shyamalan's movies, where I think I was in the middle of Signs, and I was like, I'm not up for this. This is not my kind of, I don't really like horror films. And my sister wisely said, no, you need to watch this one to the end. And she was right, because there's resolution in that one. And there are some horror movies that don't have resolution because there are evil people in the world. Ugh. I don't watch those movies. I don't watch much horror at all. I think it's important to allow your brain to go to that place of resolution and to think about and to daydream about what it will be like when we're finally through. And part of that can be coping in advance, right? Part of that can be saying, let me tally the costs that are likely to come so that I'm ready for them. And that brings me perfectly to my next point. Point number 2, worry once, then set your jaw and square your shoulders. So I had a leader once in an organization that I was in say, you need to do once work once. It's a really, really good productivity principle. If you know that, as an example, I'm a teacher. If you need to get your lesson plans done, you can get them done the night before every night and be stressed and tired and worried, or you can get them done on one Saturday at a restaurant. Go in, plug in your computer, use the free Wi-Fi, and just work, get it all done, do a really good, thoughtful job, and then you're ready for an entire month. And the difference is, first of all, your lesson plans will be better, but you'll also be happier during that full month because you're already ready to go. You know what you're going to do. You know how it's going to look. Things just feel better. Okay. So do once work once. I'm going to apply that same thing to worrying. I have a number of friends who have said that they need to not even think about COVID right now. And I want to be clear. I respect that. I think that there is some power in that, and you need to know your limits. You need to know what's actually helping and what's not. But I also think that over the long term, your brain needs to be in a place of resolution. You need to be in a place where you know what your plan is. You know how you're going to deal with this. And that's what I mean when I say set your jaw and square your shoulders. You need to know how you're going to deal with this and what it's going to look like. And so when you think about how this will end, you can think about too, and I hesitate to say this is the one that I'm most worried about as a non-therapist. For me, maybe it's just for me, it's actually really important for me to think about the worst case scenario and what it would look like, and to think about what possible losses I might incur during this time financially, and also, if I can speak bluntly, might I lose somebody that I care about? And how will I get through that? And letting my brain think through, will I still be okay? Will I be able to provide for my family? Why will I be okay? What are the reasons that will carry me through all of that? All of a sudden, because I have a plan, the worst case scenario isn't as scary anymore, right? Now, the true worst case scenario, like the crazy things, like it becomes the zombie apocalypse, I'm not worried about those because, yeah, it's possible, but the probabilities are really low. And that's another thing that kills good horror movies. Being the guy that's like, yeah, I don't think that's likely, which is definitely something I do as a defense mechanism. So when people are talking about how, oh man, the whole economy is going to shut down, well, it might. But I think that it's on the order of magnitude of 0.1% probability. It's just not that likely. It's more likely than it was 3 months ago, but it's still not very likely. And I think we need to keep that in mind. And by being able to assign it a probability, your brain somehow, by seeing that number, you can go, oh yeah, that's not really something to worry about, right? The reality is that this is probably going to be a hard few months economically. It's going to be a hard few months in terms of being isolated. Then it's probably going to be a hard couple of years economically. But we're going to beat this thing. And then we're going to be okay. And I think most people, every smart person I have looked at has said that that's the case. Now, let's talk about worrying once. So I said that you can worry once, and this is the important part. The whole point is you have to do the one work once and then leave it alone. Okay? If you do all of your lesson planning and then every night you re-lesson plan and just go back and do all of the extra work, now you've just done it twice. Okay? You have to trust yourself the first time that you worry, and you need to worry well enough that you don't feel the need to go back. That you say, I've already worried through that. I already know what will happen. And if it helps to write it down and write a little long-term plan or a midterm plan, that can be useful. But I think that there's something really valuable in confronting the reality and saying, and I know that we can still get through that because. And that's what I've done for myself. All right, number 3. I've seen a ton of people online. Well, let me review where we are. So first, what kills a good horror movie? The ending. Think a lot about how this is going to be ending, the light at the end of the tunnel. But think, too, specifically about how not only will this end, but we will be better off for it. How will things change? How will I change through this whole process? And I think that's really valuable. Number 2, you should worry, but you should worry once. Then after that, set your jaw and square your shoulders. Confront the realities. Confront what you might need to grieve over. And be prepared for it so that you're ready. I think that's really, really important. Actually, let me share a thought on that. It's interesting to me, the difference between unexpected grief and expected grief. I've lost people in my life, and I've lost people unexpectedly and expectedly. And the difference in grief is enormous, right? When we knew someone was going to go, it was still hard, but it was very, very different from when I knew that someone was going to go. And it was sad, and I miss them, but it's a very different feeling than when someone is taken away quickly. And so in some ways, with something like COVID, when I can play through what could happen, what might I lose, what do I need to grieve over, and be ready for that in advance, then when those things come, I'm ready and I feel prepared. It's not easy. It's not fun. It's not something I would choose. But I've done a lot of the emotional and mental prep work. And so I know what might be coming, and I know what I can do about it. All right, number 3, I see a lot of people connecting, and that's wonderful. I encourage them to do so. I want to add another C word, so connect, yes, but also create. I think there's a reason why we're sharing memes, and it's not just because we're humorous people, and humor is a great defense mechanism. There's something deeper, and that is that we gain feelings of security from doing creative work. I think that's really, really important. And I mean, for Pete's sake, look at me right now. Like, I'm podcasting. Why? Because this is a good way for me to feel like I've done something productive. Okay. My son is doing these really cool stop motion videos. He's 7 years old and he is having a blast. And I don't think he's as worried about COVID as I am, but he's doing awesome creative things. And there's just something remarkable about it. There's something healing about creativity. I would encourage anyone who is struggling to think of, what are the gifts that I have? What are the things that I love to do that bring me that feeling of flow, that feeling of really being, one with the blank, fill in the blank, right? The piano or the pencils, or whether you make music or you draw or whatever, finding a way to do that creative thing that brings you joy, I think will just be medicine for the soul. And if I can give you a specific way to do this, it goes back to what I talked about earlier with thinking about the happy ending, right? If you can articulate creatively how the world will be better off because of this, or how we will change in a better way. I shouldn't say better off. Nobody wants this thing to happen. But you can do that for the world, but you can also do it for you. How will I change as a person because of all of this? And I already have some ideas, but I'm going to talk about that in a minute. All right, so that's number 3. Number 4, if you have not read the Deseret News, can I just take a second to shout them out? These are like the most wholesome people in the entire world. Like, I love the Deseret News because it's like, if a serious Ned Flanders with like way more credibility that we didn't, Ned Flanders always came off to me as like potentially crazy, but like the Deseret News is just genuine. They are genuine and wholesome and really nice. Like, this is their COVID coverage, right? Meet the these are real titles from real articles. I pulled a bunch up. Meet the Americans who are canceling everything but kindness. Is it possible to boost your immune system as COVID-19 spreads? Let's see. Here are 7 tips for homeschooling parents to make it a joyful experience. Like, like everything they say is just really, it's great. How to make the most at staying at home. Read a book, try out a new recipe, or play a new game that can make social distancing more fun. Like, these are just like, this is the best thing ever. They're so happy. I am not kidding when I say I really do love the Deseret News' coverage of this. Deseret News is one of my favorite outlets. It's my hometown paper. It's also owned and operated by my church, and you can feel that in everything that it does. This is just like, let's just honestly try to be hopeful and helpful in everything they do, and I love it. I really did enjoy the article on canceling everything but kindness, but I want to focus on a different one. So, is it possible to boost your immune system as COVID-19 spreads? I think that there's tremendous power in doing what is in your power. So I don't think that you taking care of your body is going to end coronavirus everywhere. I really don't. But I do think that if you want to make things worse, don't take care of your body. Like, it will be less fun. You will be less happy. There is no disaster so bad that not taking care of yourself will make it better, right? Like, it's like I told a friend, I don't think that getting rid of all alcohol addiction in the world would solve all problems, but I can't think of a problem that is so bad that drinking alcohol would not make it worse, right? This is the same kind of a thing. There's also like power, and I already said this, but I don't know how else to say it. There's power in doing what is in your power. So there's something psychologically healing and protective in saying, yes, but I've done everything I can to prevent this. So when I read this article, and here are some of the suggestions that it gives. Let me see if I can find it. So it's Z's please. So get lots of sleep, eat as many vegetables as you can, and keep them in. So it says as close to raw form as possible. Keeping vegetables and fruits in raw form before you eat them. Try not to cook them or turn them into juices. Get lots of laughter, like humor, calming, and other mental tricks. And then lots and lots of exercise. So this is like a great little article supposedly about your physical health. But when you've done all of those things, it just feels like you've said, okay, I put my armor on against COVID today. And that sense of security doesn't mean you're going to be completely safe, but it sure feels a lot better. Okay. Now I want to address one thing that I see a lot, and that is indulgence. I am known to buy an ice cream cone for myself when I'm having a hard go of things. I don't think that's wrong, so long as it's deliberate and targeted. So I think there's a huge difference between just going nuts and doing whatever I feel like doing, and like throwing caution to the wind and just, whatever. I think there's a difference between that and saying, I'm feeling a little low. I need a little spark of joy. What would bring me a little spark of joy? And an ice cream cone tends to do it for me, especially because the rule for me with ice cream is I have to really, really savor every second of it. I just have to, like, no one else gets to bother me. I get to, like, try and be alone. It's hard, but, be away from the kids. Most of the time I do this on the way home from work. So the kids aren't there, and I pick up an ice cream cone, and I enjoy it, and I indulge, and then afterwards I am happy. And when I get home, my wife says, "How was your day?" And I can honestly look at her and say, it was great. It was hard during the middle, but, it ended really well. Because I had an ice cream cone. I don't tell her that part. I gave myself an ice cream cone. That is very different from saying I went by McDonald's or Burger King and I bought 2 value meals and downed them all because I'm stress eating, right? Those two things are very, very different. All right. Number 5, last one. Repent, because might as well, right? So it's actually kind of funny. It's not funny, but it's funny in that sense. After COVID, there was actually an earthquake in Salt Lake, and then a few of my friends and I were joking. Then there were locusts found in East Africa, and those things were actually happening already. I think we made a joke that it's a coincidence and it's the end of the world and we should all repent. And the more that I thought about it, the more that I think it's actually a really important message that it is very, I really like listening to the Stoics, and I don't think that the Stoics would probably use language like repent, right? That's much more from a Christian kind of a background. But I do think that they would say, if you have lived a good life and you are happy with where you are, then what happens to you is not as concerning. I think that's a very Stoic thing to think. And I have no intentions of dying anytime soon. I'm actually very, very happy with my kids and with my life and all of these things. But I am very comfortable that I know that I've lived the best life I can. And I've fixed things when I've made mistakes, and I've learned a lot, and I've had a lot of fun. And if there are additional course corrections, I'm always happy to take them. And, repenting can be a small thing. It can be a big thing, I should say, but it can also be a small thing, right? If I've been a bad person for a number of years, then yeah, repentance means changing direction. But if I'm doing the best that I can, then repenting just means course correcting where I can. And I think that there is psychological safety in knowing that my life is right and that I really don't want it to end and I don't want anything to end, but I feel at peace. I have a feeling in me that says that I'm living the best I know how. And I feel good about that. And that brings a sense of inner peace that can protect against some of the crazy stuff that's going on. I don't expect, by the way, and let me put some probabilities. I think there is a 99.99% chance that I get through this just fine. And for all 5 of you listening, that you will get through this just fine too. But there is a chance. And in that case, I think it's good for me to know that, if I can put it this way, now I'm going to get all emotional. I have savored every hug from my kids. So if anything were to ever happen, I would at least know that I drank in every tender moment that I could. And I feel really good about that. So I hope that something in this was helpful. I hope that if something in this was not helpful, if I talked about the end, or I think the sun exploding, I talked about at one point, and if that's giving you panic attacks, I'm sorry. So talk to me about that in the laboratorium. You can comment on how disastrous of an idea that is. If I tweaked every single bit of your anxiety, but just know that these are my best attempts, and I hope that this is helpful. I don't think I've ever talked about where that sign-off line comes from. So for a very long time, I was told when I was young that I was always such a helpful boy, and I tried to be really helpful, often to the point of making a mess of things. And so I it was just kind of in the background in my mind anyway. And I noticed that I noticed in my emails that I would often send them, especially at work, and I would say, I hope this is helpful. And I kept thinking to myself, that's a weird way to sign off an email. Like, why do you do that? And the answer is because that's actually how I feel. I really am just trying to be helpful. And I thought that was a very quirky thing to put. And then one day, I got an email from my dad, and he signed off saying, I hope this is helpful. And I knew he meant it. And it was very much the kind of email that I send, with like 10 different ideas, very clearly explained, and lots of like, hey, this might not work for you, but this is just an idea. Take it for what it's worth. I hope this is helpful. But I don't know if it will be. And he signed off, I hope this is helpful. And so ever since then, I feel actually a lot better now because I respect him so much and love him so much, that like that idea of just, I hope you find this helpful. I hope something in this makes a difference for you. And so with that, thanks for listening. I hope you find it helpful. Radical Civility is written, produced, and poorly edited by Benjamin Piccini. The views in Radical Civility are not necessarily the views of my employer, my religion, my family, or myself in the future when I'm older and wiser. Bye, everybody.